would like to request for the 3 refuges and 5 precepts before we start your talk.
Okay.
Okay.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. You repeat 3 times.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddham saranam gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Saranagamana sampurna.
Ama Bhante.
Panatipata veramani sikkapadam samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Nadana veramani sikkapadam samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumichachara veramani sikkapadam samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura miraya majapamadatana veramani sikkapadam samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majja pamadatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Tisaranena saddimu pancasila dhamma saddukam surakitam katva apamadena sampadetabbang. Ama Bhante.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I'm so happy to see all of you. It has been a while being here at Buddhist Fellowship. And it has been almost 5 years, isn't it? 5 years or 4 years?
Bhante, but you came end of last year, right?
December, but I didn't give a talk.
Yeah,
like
didn't
this.
give a talk.
It was a
Q&A session because
yes.
we didn't have time to apply for your MWP.
Yes, so yeah. I'm so grateful to see all of you. It has been a while, almost
5 years, yeah.
5 years.
I think so.
5 years has passed without really seeing you. Some of you, of course, have seen you, but many of you haven't seen for a while. All the same, you are welcome back to explore the mysteries of the Dhamma. Today's topic is about exploring the causes of suffering, isn't it? Yes. It's amazing we need these books, all these books to explore this. Maybe you don't see them. we need to explore together all this. Yeah, so now maybe you have already noticed that I'm no longer sitting there. Dukkha, because of dukkha. So that's the cause of dukkha now already. I know during construction, and I climbed on a ladder to watch what the builders are doing, and my knee kind of turned a little bit like this, and I kind of injured my leg, but it's recovering, but I don't want to hurt it. I need to heal fast. Yes, but I missed that point. But of course, that's part of having this body and mind. That's part of being a human being with this body. So now we are going to really look at what are the causes of suffering. Normally when I give talks, I like a very, very interactive session, whereby you also bring some of the causes of suffering that you know of.
Sorry. Just the mic a bit too far.
You can't hear me?
No, the machine cannot hear you.
Oh, I thought I have a natural mic. Really? That's what I thought. You are going to overhear me, that's a problem. When you put it above, so I have a very big sound system, natural one. Yes, thank you very much. So as I said that normally these talks, there are sutta studies. Even when I give a talk, my teacher Bhante Gunaratana told me, never give a Dhamma talk without referring to the Buddha. Yeah, so that's why you see me with many things. And no wonder they gave me the name Buddharakkhita. Protected by the Buddha, so I need to protect also the Dhamma. So even when I say I'm going to give a Dhamma talk, very soon we'll end up with a discourse. So don't be, when you see all these topics I'm going to give, you are going to always see some sutta emerging, you know, because that's what I was trained by my teacher, that talk about the Buddha, what he taught. So now we are going to explore together what are the causes of suffering. Of course, you have to know what's suffering. We all know that. Do we need the Buddha to tell us suffering? Who thinks that we need the Buddha to tell us suffering? Just raise your hand. For me, I like interactive session. I don't want to sit here and then I talk, and then you are listening. No, I want some interactive. The question is, do we need the Buddha to tell us suffering? No? We don't need. Are you sure?
Parts of it.
No, there is no right or wrong answer. We are going to participate. In many ways, you are the one who's going to give even the Dhamma talk. So I like a very interactive session, a discussion, which is called Dhamma Sakkacha. Me discussing the Dhamma at the right time. So, who thinks it doesn't need the Buddha to know about suffering? You raise your hand. You don't need a Buddha. You know about suffering. You don't need him. You need the Buddha or you don't? Very interesting. Who doesn't need the Buddha? Who needs the Buddha to tell about suffering? What's suffering in life? You need a Buddha. Okay, so actually, when you look at the Buddha, the way he taught suffering, today I'm just going to talk about causes of suffering, but before we talk about suffering, we need to read it, causes of suffering. Let us look at suffering first. The way the Buddha taught actually suffering, it was very interesting. Dukkha. You know the meaning of dukkha with all these translations, unsatisfactoriness, dissatisfaction, stress, and all that. there is no single English word that really matches the Buddha's word dukkha. I always tell people, if you're trying to find out the English word for dukkha, you get more dukkha. So it's better you leave alone. In fact, there's a few words that my teacher told me to leave them alone. Don't touch them, to translate them in English. One is Dhamma, which is the fourth foundation of mindfulness, with a small d. They say mental phenomena, what. You will never get it. Because there's categories of Dhamma. You cannot really find a one English word. Another one, piti. P with a long I. It says leave that word alone in Pali. If you don't want to learn Pali, I'm sorry. But leave the word alone. Piti. Piti is joy, but every time you translate it, rapture, bliss, you always go far away from the word. In fact, what's very strange for dukkha, the more you try to get one word, the more you get far away from the meaning. And the more you get far away the meaning. Like dukkha, you talk about unsatisfactoriness, discomfort, what. You better really leave it alone, dukkha, and make it English word. Another word my teacher told me not to bother about looking for the meaning, you just have to be contented, is chitta, consciousness. Chitta, the word chitta. Yes, so you call it mind, then what about what about nama? Then you keep on consciousness. So that my teacher told me about 5 words. I better learn Pali and understand them in Pali language and then go from there, So now, dukkha. So let us just leave the word dukkha like that. So there's some kind of dukkha that we really need the Buddha to tell us. But others we don't need. Like he talked about birth is suffering. You don't need the Buddha to tell you that. He talks about aging. This I think is battle. Why I'm not sitting there is aging. Then he talks about sickness. He talks about death. You don't need the Buddha to tell you about death. We see it all the time. Then he talks about sorrow. We all have experienced sorrow, lamentation, then pain. Right there, I'm sitting there, pain comes. So I don't need the Buddha. Pain. Then he talks about grief. Also we grieve when there's loss, of course. Then the Buddha talks about also what called despair. Despair. He talks about be associated with the unloved people, also to be separated from loved ones, then also of course, the Buddha talks about getting what you don't want. He talks about the last kind of suffering you need the Buddha to tell you, my friend. Because the first one is more of psychological and physiological, but the doctrinal aspect of suffering, the doctrinal part of suffering, you need the Buddha. Because the Buddha said, in short, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. That one you need the Buddha to tell you and explain you what are those 5 and what's clinging and all that. The rest you don't need the Buddha. We all have seen associated with what's lovely one. What's people whom we don't love. Actually, I remember when I was very young, whenever my mother left, I would really cry. I would cry. I remember very well, whenever I'm going, I would cry, don't go. But she has to go to work. I would tell her, don't go. I was crying. So now, I grew up. My mother, when she leaves, no problem. I never knew that it will come back to her. Now, come maybe 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. Come 2013, I had such a busy schedule that I would go to Uganda and spend only 3 hours, sometimes 45 minutes. Sometimes I would spend about 3 days. My mother said, please, can you stay in Uganda for a while? But I said, I didn't say I have to go to work. I was going for giving Dhamma talks. And then I would see that she's nearly even shedding tears that really actually she was being separated now. Yeah. So these things you don't need the Buddha, but really you need the Buddha when the Buddha mentioned in short. I don't know why even the Buddha said in short, because that's a lot. When we talk about the doctrine aspect of suffering, you need the Buddha to tell you what are the 5 aggregates. You know already the 5 aggregates. There's body, physical body, feelings, and then perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These things you cannot, without the Buddha, you cannot understand. In fact, it's amazing that the Buddha explained them as a critical response to what the teaching he found already. When the Buddha came, there was already some teaching. 62 views were there already in India. And in order the Buddha to counteract those kind of views people had, you can call them religions, Buddha didn't want to create the 63rd view. He wanted to create something that stay outside those views, which were bringing a lot of suffering. So the answer to this question, whether you need the Buddha to tell you about suffering, the answer to this question, yes. The part of the doctrinal aspect of suffering, you need the Buddha to explain. The psychological and the physiological kind of suffering, you don't need the Buddha to tell you, like pain and all that. So now, we have sorted it out. Now the second question, do we really need the Buddha to tell us the cause of suffering? Yes or no? I would like to hear. Yes? You know, let me tell you, in England, the apples were falling. The apples from the trees, they were falling. Everybody was seeing them falling, you know. And they would pick them from the ground. But nobody knew why apples were falling from the tree. It took one person called Isaac Newton to really figure out, wow, this is because of gravity, second law of gravity. Second law of gravity. And then he started this law, the second law of gravity, about falling of things, you know. And people are now starting to know the cause, why things fall. Whether you know it or not, you will fall down. Even if you have a degree in physics, if you don't obey that law, you fall down. And we can say, yes, Isaac Newton told us why apples were falling, why things fall. Now the question to you, do you need the Buddha to tell you the cause of suffering? Yes or no? Anybody? You need the Buddha or no? You need the Buddha. You climb on a tree here, and fall down. You break down and get pain. So do you need the Buddha to tell you that suffering, that pain? Who doesn't need a Buddha? I want to see. We have to go systematically whether you need the Buddha to tell you, because today's topic is called exploring the causes of suffering. So you have to tell me whether you need the Buddha to tell you the causes of suffering or not. We start one by one. Do you need a Buddha? You need a Buddha. Okay? You need a Buddha? You don't know the causes of suffering. Yes, you need the Buddha. You need. I want to see who doesn't need the Buddha too. Who doesn't need the Buddha? You do. So you don't know the causes of suffering. Some, maybe you know some, and some you don't know. My friend, do you need a Buddha? I want to see who doesn't need the Buddha. Sister Miche. You see, for me, let me tell you, one time, you see how I learned Buddhism. I went to India to study. I didn't know any Buddhism. When I was 23 years, I didn't know even the word Buddha. I just knew the word Gautama. Only, that's what I knew. In history, we studied Gautama. The word Buddha, I never even heard of it. So when I went to study in India at a university in Punjab, Chandigarh, I found monks, Thai monks. And I'm just telling a story how I got to know the cause of suffering from my direct experience, you know. Yeah, because I've been teaching in Uganda and I tell them the cause of suffering, they say no. They say, no, that's not the cause. We all know greed, hatred, and delusion. And then they say that's not the cause of suffering, you know. So I've been challenged in Africa. So now I tell you my story about how I know the cause of suffering. Direct experience. So I found the monks there, and then they told me about Buddhism and the Buddhist monks. We hung around with them. So I was so happy to see those human beings. I was so happy. I wanted to know what really makes them happy. So then they took me to the temple. They told me they meditate and all that. So now, after a short time, about a few months, I was reading in a newsroom. They showed me newspapers that there is what we call snowfall. Snowfall. And being a Ugandan, I've never seen snow. Only ice cubes in a refrigerator. That's all my knowledge about snow. But I used to put in the mouth and eat them. I enjoyed them, and that's it. But they were very cold. That much I knew how to eat them. Very cold. So when I went to India, they told me there's snowfall, there's pictures of snow falling, white flakes, and I said, wow, I've never seen this. They said tourists can go and see it. So after my exams, that was 1990, I get into the bus. About 8 hours, I went to Shimla. Shimla, and then once I saw it was sunshine, very bright. Then I saw the snowflakes. I had got a camera, actually. My friend from Thailand gave it to me. It was using film like this. You had to wind like this, very best camera. As soon as the bus stopped, I went out of the bus and I started walking in the snow. I had put on a jacket because the weather was cold, but I never experienced the snowflakes. So what I did, I opened. I opened here, they were going here, they were going here, they were going. I'm telling you, the Indian people were looking at this African boy who is playing with snow like that. So just everywhere there was snowflakes, including inside. Even I opened so that they can enter. My friend, after 1 minute, it was freezing cold. And this was my first time to really get so cold like that. I'm telling you, the camera, because I didn't have gloves, because it was a warm day, but the snowflakes were so warm, actually. I never knew that they're going to get cold. So they melted, and then I dropped even the camera down. And I was in this excruciating suffering, and it's very painful. And then that's when it dawned on me and said, wow, my desire to see snow brought the suffering. So that's where I connected. I mean, I've been suffering all the time, but I was not connecting it to desire. But most people, we all suffer, but we don't connect immediately until it hits so hard, and then you feel you are suffering. Because you cannot say, I go to eat pizza and I'm suffering. Do you say that? So we are going to see some of the teaching that we need to see, maybe the Buddha telling us. Maybe dukkha, yes, you can experience it. Dukkha, we call dukkha. That means real suffering. But there's some dukkha which is very subtle. It's called dukkha, do change, you know, unpleasant feeling. I mean, pleasant feeling changing into unpleasant and all that. That one, we may need a little bit of meditation. Yes, and then there's another dukkha which called dukkha, sankhara dukkha. That one, definitely, because this is dukkha due to formation, suffering due to the formation. That means 5 aggregates. They are subject to rise and passing away. They're oppressed and all that. That one you really need the Buddha to tell you, really. There's certain things we need the Buddha to tell us, and there's certain things we don't need the Buddha to tell us. So now, according to the teaching of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha, the causes of suffering were meant for a specific purpose. So we might need the Buddha to tell us why he introduced them. Some of them we may not need. Like for that, I was not a Buddhist. I wasn't a Buddhist that time when I suffered, but I knew that it's because I boarded a bus, because out of desire to go to Sisino, I found out I was in excruciating pain. So now that suffering, you can see it. You may not need the Buddha to tell you, but there's some kind of suffering. And actually, you might need also the Buddha because you may not connect. You may not connect suffering and all that. So you need to be reminded by the Buddha what he meant by desire, right? And now we are going to read in the sutta. Because, I mean, this touching of the snow, like even a baby, when they touch hot fire, they will suffer, you know. You see? So now they will tell you because you are touching the fire, that's why you suffered. That much you can tell. But when the Buddha is talking about the craving for sensual pleasures, then we start now needing the Buddha, what he meant. What he meant by craving for sensual pleasures. What does he mean? What does it mean, craving for existence? What does Buddha mean? Craving for non-existence. What did the Buddha mean? For me, I cannot figure it out until I really appreciated why the Buddha introduced those teachings. So let me tell you in one discourse. Sister Eileen, you told me I can read here. I can read. So now I can read here. Let me see. One discourse, the first discourse, as we are going to explore together, I'm going to read to you the cause of suffering. This one. This is called Masacha Vibhanga Sutta. I'm going to refer to all the suttas. You need to read it. But are you going to see from here? Are you going to see from here? Sacha, the first discourse is called Sacha Vibhanga Sutta. This is Majjhima Nikaya. So, now, number is 141. 141. Yeah, so now, as I told you, causes of suffering. I can walk like this and fall in the ditch. That one I can know myself that because I was walking and I fell into the ditch. That is no problem. You can understand it. But what the Buddha meant by craving for sensual pleasures, craving for sensual pleasures, sense pleasures, that you need. What he meant by craving. You need a Buddha to tell you. Yes, definitely. Now I'm going to drink my thing like this. I drink like this. I burn my tongue. That one, even if I'm not a Buddhist, I can know that. I can know that cause of suffering is because I was taking something hot. That one is immediate. But what the Buddha was trying to say here is something very deep. That's why I need to explore with you together. And also other causes of suffering. Another one is craving for existence. The third one is craving for non-existence. So now our exploration today is going to be like this in summary. We are going to look at if this suffering, we are going to look at internal causes. Internal what? Causes of suffering. Internal causes. And we are going to look at external causes. External causes. Right? External causes. External causes. Causes. Because for most part, we always dwell here as Buddhists. For the most part, always we dwell where? At the internal causes. These are internal causes. Internal factors and what causes suffering. These are the things we're going to explore, external and internal. So now, let us read the sutta, what the Buddha talked about craving. Craving, the Pali word is tanha. Tanha, which means thirst. Which means what? thirst. Literally, it means thirst. So now the Buddha talks about what, friends, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It's craving, which brings renewal of being. It's accompanied by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. That is craving for sensual pleasures, right? Then craving for being, craving for non-being. This is called the noble truth of suffering. This is the whole discourse called an exposition of the truth. Now, the Buddha is giving 3 causes of suffering there. The question is, do you think these are the only 3 causes of suffering? What others? What do we have others? Other causes of suffering? Please, raise your hand if you know other causes. Why the Buddha is not talking about anger? Anger also causes suffering. My friend, this is very interesting. Why the Buddha is really in the noble truth, the Four Noble Truths that leads to awakening. Why the Buddha is restricting himself to those? We need to discuss these things. This is a discussion. Really, why is he not talking about even ignorance? So is it ignorance included in the craving? Why is he not talking about envy? Because also envy brings suffering. Because as we see in Satya Sutta, in Digha Nikaya, the Buddha talks about that envy can bring suffering. People want to peace, but they end up to suffer because they envy each other. There's dislike and like and all that. We look at also other defilements. Fear. Why the Buddha is not talking about fear leads to suffering here? No, we're talking about the second noble truth. This is something that I want to really explore with you so that you really understand exactly. It's an exploration. Why the Buddha is not talking about anxiety? Why the Buddha is not talking about other defilement that also causes suffering? Okay, why is the Buddha not talking about even the karma at the moment? Why is the Buddha not talking about assault? You can suffer because of people beating you up. So who knows the reason? Once you find the reason, then you know how we are going to explore this. Because there are so many causes of suffering. Others are external. Poverty. Poverty is a cause of suffering. Why in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is not talking about it? Because we are going to explore a certain discourse which talks about economic factors. Poor economic policies. We are going to explore it there. So why is the Buddha not bringing it here in the Four Noble Truths that lead to liberation? Any reason? He's talking about the origin of suffering, and now he's not bringing us all those things. You know, craving for sensual pleasure, that means when testing, hearing, and all that. It's all clear now. But there must be a reason I would like you to know. Then you really appreciate Buddha's teaching. Mm-hmm. Mental state. The mental posture, mental state rather than a physical, and the root cause is craving. That's okay. That's good. Any other person? Yes, Sister Kim. Envy because you want something, somebody else has it, you don't have it, so you feel envious. Okay.
Yeah, Bhante.
So it's under craving, sorry.
Okay. Now, thank you very much. We know that the Buddha talks about greed, hatred, and delusion. By the way, you know the difference between the delusion and ignorance? Last time I told you. Do you know the difference between ignorance and delusion? Last time I told you. Oh, maybe. No. No, okay. These are called unwholesome. These are kusala. Yeah? Akusala. This what? This is akusala, unwholesome, unskillful states of mind. The Buddha told us already these unskillful states of mind, greed. He talks about, they cause suffering. He doesn't talk even about ignorance. So now my question is very simple. Why is it really in the second noble truth? This is the second noble truth. Noble truth. Cause of suffering. Origin. Genesis. Genesis of what? Dukkha. So now I would like to hear why the Buddha is not talking about hatred or anger or ill will. He's not talking about ignorance. He's just telling us craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, craving for non-being. And once you get rid of this, that's you to reach what we call nirodha. Nirodha. I told you last time, I think, ni means no, and rodha means prison. Rodha means what? Prison. So no prison. So according to the Buddha said, if you really overcome this, you're no longer confined, no confined. So rodha is also confinement. So no confinement. So that means if you want to get liberated, you just get rid of the same thing, you know? So now the question is very simple. Why the Buddha is not talking about these kind of things right here? So once we get this, then we are going to explore very well. Because there's other causes of suffering. We have even poor economic policies. Poor what? Poor economic policies that lead to suffering. As I'm going to show you today, poor economic policies, that means in terms of wealth. Then we are going to explore that together. But let us first start with the internal. Who knows the reason? Once you know the reason, then you are going to see.
Bhante,
That is the scheme of liberation. As far as the Four Noble Truth is concerned, that's the scheme he put in place.
Bhante, like Sis Kim said, some of them falls under, like greed falls under the first craving for sensual pleasures. If you don't have, you won't have suffering.
What about this one?
Then like hatred, envy, all that falls the second and third craving for existence and non-existence. You crave to be somebody or you crave not to be, and that gives you the envy or hatred about something against somebody or to that effect.
Yeah, that's okay, but there's something, the reason why the Buddha just restricted himself like this. But I'm going to tell you the reason why. All others also lead to suffering, but the Buddha's teaching is aimed at a specific, okay. I'm going to rub this one. The Buddha's teaching is of the Four Noble Truth is aimed at a very specific purpose. So in order to really appreciate why the Buddha singled that one, you'll be surprised why the Buddha, the rest is also recognized as the causes of suffering. But really, why the Buddha singled these three, there was a purpose. We are going to see. Now, the Buddha's teaching, I told you the Buddha, when he came to the scene, there were 60 what? 62 views. 62 views. All of those views, they fall into the category of what? Of all of them, like 55 of them, belong to what we call eternalistic view. Eternalist views. All right? This eternalist view, the other one belong to what we call annihilation. Annihilation. Nihilism, or nihilism. Annihilation, annihilation, nism. So in other words, there are 7. So 55 plus 7 equals 60 what? 62. All of them, you can find them in Brahmanjara Sutta. Brahmanjara Sutta is in Digha Nikaya. You find all those views being grouped like this. So now, the reason why in the Second Noble Truth, the Buddha is talking about the causes of suffering as craving for sensual pleasures, craving for non-existence, craving for existence. The Buddha's teaching that he introduced as the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, it was a critical response to these views. It was what? A critical response. I'm going to write for you to remember. A critical what? A critical response. Response to the two conflicting views. Conflicting what? Conflicting views. Already talk about conflict because actually conflicting views. These views are what? Conflicting. So why he thought it was a critical response to this one? So he knew that this was bringing suffering. And all this was because of the self-identity views. Self what? Identity views. Identity view. Sakaya Ditti. That was a major problem that was disturbing those days people. People were always wondering where there's a self inside you and where it's going, in the next world or what. So now, why he was really identifying, really teaching the Four Noble Truths, and all teaching, by the way, of the Buddha, whether it's non-self, and we are going to see this actually as we go. Stay tuned. I'm going to discuss all these things, all related to this, actually. All the Buddha's teaching is related to what? A critical response to these views. Whether you explore each teaching, whether dependent origination, it's all related to really stop people from harboring these views, all right? So now, what the eternalist people believed, they believed that the self has what we call duality, duality, all right? Duality, the self was different. That means the self and the body are different, and the body, they were separate. That's what they believed. And then on the other side, they believed in what we call identity. Identity means that the self and the body are identical. So now at the point of death, this is what happens. Because the self and the body is identical, so at the point of the death, everything will be annihilated. That means as soon as you die, this, like the body and the self was believed to have 4 elements. The self was believed to what? Because this is a materialistic view. So they believe that this self has what we call elements, like earth element, water element, and all that. So at the moment of death, this is the body, and the self is composed of these 4 elements. So at the moment of death, water goes to water, earth goes to earth, and kaput, finish. What this brought was called self-indulgence. Self what? Self-indulgence. Indulgence. Why did they have to self-indulge? Because they have only a single life. Enjoy while still here. Enjoy what? While still here. So now they had what we call sensual pleasures. Sense what? Pleasures. They enjoyed so much sensual pleasures. And according to the Buddha, we found out people who are attached to sensual pleasures because they're enjoying with a view this here. So in other words, really the cause of suffering there, it's actually craving to sensual pleasures with the wrong view. That's the best way to describe it. Craving for sensual pleasures with wrong view. Are we together? You have to put that word there to qualify it. So now this brought a lot of suffering because here they could sacrifice 100 cows, 500 cows and all these things, and enjoy. Because they know that after some stage, they are not going to have a next life. But the Buddha thought, okay, there's a next life and rebirth and all that. So that was the problem. So he identified this problem, and then that's what he taught in the Second Noble Truth. Because there was a problem. He didn't teach because there was no problem, because he enjoys to give talks. No. The Buddha, when he was teaching, he didn't teach because he enjoys to give a particular talk. Whenever the teaching the Buddha gave, it was a critical response to the two conflicting views that he found out in the world. And it was causing a lot of suffering. So that's why people really indulged. They were self-indulged. This is what Buddha talked about as an extreme. This what? Extreme. And his teaching on the Noble Eightfold Path was to stay out of these two extremes, not to compromise them. All right? Now we go to this side. We go to this side. We go to this side. This side also was problematic. This side, it was problematic. Here, with the eternalistic view, they thought that there's duality. The self and the body is different. So what they did, these people, do with these 55 views, what they believed is that the self is soul and it's indestructible. That means as soon as you die, it's going to escape from the body. All right? Either through the nose. As soon as you die, the soul or the self is going to what? To go eternally. It's like in Hindu tradition, they talk about a soul, like compared to in Bhagavad Gita, they talk about wearing a coat, and now you remove your coat, and then go and wear another coat. So in other words, just removing your coat. So here the self, our soul, was believed to continue on. Here it was annihilated. Here to continue. But that continuation, what happened is that people start having what you call behaviors. These are called behaviors. The behaviors was rites and what? Rites and rituals. Rites and what? Rituals. Why did they do rites and rituals? Is to please where the soul is going. To please them, so that they escape, this self or soul escapes the body. So the rites and ritual to purify the what? The soul. So this is like bathing in water. Water to purify the what? The soul. The soul. So in Hindu also they do it. They still do. I mean, different religions also, I think they still do it. Even African religions, they believe that you immerse yourself in water to purify. This is still a belief actually. But the Buddha said that okay, you know, if it's just you can purify your sins by immersing in water. They say fish and frog will be already purified. The fish and frogs, they will be in heaven already because that's their home. So now he said, no, this cannot. So people did what? Rites and rituals, and they're called attachment rites and rituals. Attachment what? So this brought a lot of problems because this one they had to also sacrifice and all these things to do rituals in order to attain liberation. So this brought a lot of problems. Suffering. Here there was suffering. All right? There was what? Suffering. Because people had to stand even on one leg for the whole year. Like this. People stand on a leg for what? For the whole year. And then there are so many practices they did to walk like cows, to all rituals to walk like cows and stay without food. This is what we call self-mortification. As opposed to what? Self-indulgence. They call what we call self-what? Self-mortification. Mortification. Why they mortificated themselves? So that the soul go out of the gravity of the body, out of the gravity pool of the body, right? So that's why they have to do self-mortification. If you remember the discourse the Buddha gave, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha talks about that his teaching is a middle way. Is a middle way. That means it's stay clear out of this and this one. Because this is suffering, self-mortification of your body, physical body. You stay like months without eating and all this. So it was bringing what? Suffering. And also he was bringing suffering. So now people who believed in internalistic view, they had what you call being. Being. They were craving for what? Being. So that at least because of the being, they are going to have eternal life. So you continue on going. Now the problem with this side, they had what you call non-what? Non-being. Being or existence, non-existence. Non-existence. This one, existence. Existence. Okay? So now, that's why in the second noble truth, the Buddha is talking about craving for what? It causes suffering. Craving for what? Causes suffering. Craving for what? Craving for sensual pleasure. That's why this is number one. This is number one. This is number two. This is number three. That's it. You need the Buddha. Because the Buddha, this is why I say I illustrated you need the Buddha to tell you the causes of suffering. Because it was his teaching which was corresponding to those views. And now what he merged was here like this, to stay away from this suffering. So then he taught the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path, I think I remembered now, you know it very well, how to overcome is visa. Sister Irene, you know that? Yeah, you know. I need to create a credit card, but the problem, I'm a monk. I would have created a credit card which is called LE, and now MasterCard, all right? But now we don't have LE, you know? We don't have them.
No, French is le.
Really?
Le is the MasterCard. Visa.
They have the MasterCard called La.
No. Visa, the MasterCard. You know.
No, this is American Express. This is American Express. American Express. But for me, this is right view, right intention, right speech, right action. But this called, instead of livelihood, there's a very fancy word which you call alimentation. Alimentation. It's the same, alimentation. Alimentation. All right? Alimentation. It's actually another word for livelihood. And then mindfulness. So he taught this one to overcome suffering, this kind of suffering. So the answer, yes, you need the Buddha to tell you the causes of suffering. You need. Because his teaching was for a specific purpose. Not just what we call intellectual exercises. Not just for discussion's sake. Because he was responding to what it is. Most of the time I'm going to be here and teach you more about this. More of this, because we don't appreciate sometimes Buddha's teaching actually. We learn it, but we don't appreciate what really Buddha was trying to say. So this is my introduction talk, and once you get this one, you'll never be disturbed by Buddha's teaching. Whether it's anatta, whether dependent origination one, you will never be baffled by Buddha's teaching, because all Buddha's teaching, please get it today, every Buddha's teaching was a critical response to these two views. If you don't know these two views and how they are related and all this kind of thing, you are going to have a problem with Buddha, understanding Buddha's teaching. Because every time you'll be asking, why the Buddha was teaching? So today, start to learn that every single Buddha's teaching you are learning was a critical response to what? The two binary conflicting views. And they are bringing suffering. Let us even look at our life. Most of the time we suffer because of conflicting views. Isn't it? Let's say desire. You know why we suffer with desire? It's conflicting. What conflict? On one time, we desire for stability, and then on the other side, the things are unstable, isn't it? Don't you think that's a conflict? These are a conflict already right there. And that's what we call dukkha, because the desire we have is desiring for stability. We want things to be stable. But do you think things are stable? No, they don't give us time to be stable. They're always changing. COVID threw a surprise to the world, you know. Yeah, for me, I was so surprised about the COVID thing, you know. I mean, I thought it's going to affect few countries, but I mean, even the most remote country, it was all affected. And in fact, even that brings the teaching on dependent origination. Everything, when the Buddha was teaching dependent origination, he was trying to avoid this, being and non-being. Because with dependent origination, we found out everything is dependently arising. In fact, one time the Buddha, let me tell you, one time somebody asked the Buddha, what's the cause of suffering? I know, actually, one of the monks asked, what's the cause of suffering? Then again, the Buddha also, I think, was asked the question. I look for the sutta where it is, actually. When there was one of those people, I think was, I don't remember the name, was asked what's the cause of suffering. Then the person said, is the cause of suffering oneself? Then the Buddha said no. Is the cause of suffering is because of others? The Buddha said no. Is the cause of suffering due to both oneself and others? The Buddha said no. Is the cause of suffering due to, no, neither oneself, no, others? The Buddha said no. Then the person was totally confused. Because, I mean, these are the four possibilities. Either suffering is caused by oneself, either it's caused by others, or both oneself and others. Neither, the Buddha said no. Confused. Buddha's bringing in a new teaching now. That suffering is dependently arising. Is what? Dependently arising. So the Buddha now is teaching is teaching what he called dependent origination. Yeah? That's what he's teaching, that we should look at suffering as depending on certain conditions. And for sure, when we look at the five aggregates, which is summarized that they're dukkha, their causes are conditioned. You know, clinging. Clinging is also conditioned. They come due to cause and condition. So I will give a whole talk about clinging, the four kinds of clinging at some time. So now, since now we know that we need the Buddha to tell us, those who thought you don't need, but you need. Because for the entire teaching was trying to respond to the problem of his time, you know. So we need. If he doesn't tell us, we don't know what he was trying to teach. You see? He was just not creating things from his head. But he knew that people were suffering because of these views. They were thinking about the self. And the more you introduce in a self, when you're craving, they need to just bring like fuel, you know. Yeah, so this kind of teaching is very, very important. So now the next thing is, by the way, how long this teaching takes, is to explore some teachings about the external causes of suffering. You know the internal causes, but what are the external causes of suffering? We need to explore together. So that one we are going to look at the discourse here. Do you know some external causes of suffering according to experience? What are the external causes? You know? Heat, cold, what? There's a very juicy discourse here. It's called Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda Sutta. I'm going to, let me look at where it's referred. We are going to look at, before actually we go to external causes, I've remembered the internal causes. Let me see. Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda. We are going to look at things that we normally don't find in Noble Eightfold Path. I mean, in the Second Noble Truth. It's very interesting. Because this question arose when I was teaching in New York. Somebody asked me, was a student, he said, Bhante, every time you say causes of suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. Every time you talk about, but is there any suffering that is not caused by myself? Is there any suffering that is outside greed, hatred, and delusion? And then I had to give him this discourse, actually. Girimananda discourse, let me see. It's very interesting. Let me see. It's here. Girimananda discourse. It's page. Let me look at the page of Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda Sutta, it should be in Anguttara Nikaya. I'm going to, I marked the discourse, but I think it's a different book. Let me pull it out here. Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda. Girimananda. Ah, okay. Huh? Girimananda Sutta. Okay. What's the page? I'd marked a book. Do you have another book there? I had marked it here, but I don't know where the marks are moved. Eh? Page what?
10.6. No, they only give the chapter and the sutta number.
Okay, anyway, Girimananda Sutta.
10.60.
10.6. Okay, I know it in my head anyway, so Girimananda Sutta. Girimananda, it's in tens maybe. 10 perceptions. You know 10 perceptions? It should be 10. Yeah, tens, 130. Eh? 60. Page 60.
No, verse 60.
Yeah. Okay, Girimananda Sutta, we are going to go to it. Let me go to one. I had marked it there, but let's go to another. Okay, Girimananda Sutta. Okay. So now, as we are looking for Girimananda Sutta, let's go to external causes a little bit. One discourse is called Chakavat Sutta. Chakavat Sutta. Chakavat Sihanada. Another one is called Kutadanta. Kutadanta is page 135. You saw? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, this is a Girimananda Sutta. I'm going to read to you what are the causes of suffering. You'll be surprised that are not given in Second Noble Truth. Okay. I'm going to skip the preliminary. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savat and all that. You know that preliminaries. So let's go to the number 4. There are 10 perceptions, but number 4. And what Ananda is the perception of danger. Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a bhikkhu reflects thus: this body is the source of much pain. Is that not dukkha? The body is a source of what? Much pain and danger. For all sorts of affliction arise in this body. That is eye disease, disease of the inner ear, nose disease, tongue disease, body disease, head disease, disease of the external ear, mouth disease, tooth disease, cough, asthma, catarrh. It's amazing the Buddha knew all this. Pyrexia, fever, stomach ache, fainting, dysentery, grips, cholera, leprosy, boils, eczema, tuberculosis, epilepsy, ringworm, itch. He talks about itching also. By the way, people ask me, what do I do with the itch when I'm meditating? I said, don't scratch it until it becomes life-threatening. So now, the Buddha is listing, that's a problem also. Who has a problem with itches? Sometimes when you meditate, I feel like something itching, you know. And for me, sometimes it happens when I'm being interviewed on a television or on a I'm telling you, I went to Thailand, and there was a movie being shot by for novice monks, and I flew from all over USA. The movie people told me, please fly through Hong Kong. I went to a monastery in northern Thailand. They were ordaining these novice monks from the mothers Thai and fathers from Europe. There are so many, like 12 of them. They are not monk, they are not Thai, but their mothers Thai. So they wanted to make a movie called Little Monks. So they said there's an African monk. There was only one monk who was happened to be a Kenya, and novice monk. They say this novice monk is lonely. You need an African monk. So the father is teaching in a university, but just put the boy there, never come, you know. So I fly and to be part of the movie. Now they are interviewing me because I arrived late and they are too late to set up stuff. So then they're interviewing me about 5:30, and my head is shaved, clean shaved. I'm telling you, mosquitoes bite me. And then the television was there, and a movement of scratching. I said, I don't want this to be part of the movie. Maybe they would have edited out, but it didn't look monk-like. So sometime I felt itches, you know, and I was these monks in the forest, they don't bite like African mosquitoes. You know, in Uganda, they bite me a lot, but not these ones. These ones, they were biting everywhere. I had shaved my head very well. So the itch, you are right, the Buddha was right here. It's a problem also. I never realized that it's part of this. So now scrub, chicken pox, scrubbies, hemorrhage, diabetes. How did the Buddha knew all this? Hemorrhoid, cancer, fistula. This 2600, Buddha knew this. Now we're all familiar with this, but I would like you to pay attention to this. Illness originating from bile. Illness originating from flame, wind, and their combination. Those are humors. By the way, even the Greek philosopher, they knew about this actually, that humors, they can cause some disease. In other words, this is due to the imbalances of these humors, bile and flame and wind. Ayurvedic doctors will tell you that. Any Ayurvedic doctor will tell you that. Then another interesting thing to know, illness produced by careless behavior. Illness what? Produced by careless behavior. That also causes problem. Illness produced by careless behavior. Illness produced by assault. That means assault, when somebody beat you, physically abuse you, then there is also suffering there. Illness produced as a result of karma. Illness produced as a result of what? Karma. Buddha never mentioned there. Right? Then, cold, heat, hunger, thirst, defecation, and urination. That's also a problem. Hunger is worst of all, actually. Because when you have malaria, you can cure it. Maybe and then you become healthy again. But hunger, you can't cure it. You can eat, but next life, you born, you find again. Maybe next life when you're born, you don't find malaria. Maybe like now, I'm born in Africa, I get malaria. Maybe I come to another country, maybe Australia, there's no malaria. I get another kind of disease. But hunger, the same kind of disease. It doesn't matter whether you're born in Australia, born in Singapore. So Buddha identified this kind of thing. Thirst is also the same. Thus, the contemplation, thus he contemplates, he dwells contemplating danger in this body. This is called perception of danger. So now, here we see about 8 causes, you know. We found out all this which you are familiar. We found out to change in climate. By the way, illness produced by change of climate. Buddha knew, do you know what to call SAD? What called? SAD. It's called SAD. it's a season when winter changes. Disorder. Seasonal something. It's SAD. Season something. Seasonal. I've forgotten. But this is a problem people who live in winter. When the season change and winter comes, they suffer that illness. Yes, something like that. So here the Buddha knew about it. So we have illness produced by what? Changing in. So illness is suffering, isn't it? Then there is the illness produced by careless behavior, illness produced by assault, illness produced by karma. Then cold and all this kind of thing. So we can see the Buddha already is identified causes of suffering, which are not normally coming in the second noble truth. Because in the second noble truth, we don't find illness caused by change of climate. He's talking about craving for sensual pleasures. He's talking about craving for being and non-being, and that is causing suffering. And when you remove that, you get what we call nirodha, which means cessation of the same causes, and then you get liberated, So these are very interesting when you are looking at the external causes. There are many discourses, but I think this is enough for internal. We want to look at external, then I'll open to Q&A. All right? Let us look at external causes. External causes. We are going to look at two discourses, and then I'll open I open question and answer session. So we have to look at one discourse, which is called unless you want to know the definition of sensual desires. I think you know all. You already know. How, before I go to external causes, I want to give you a flavor of how the Buddha really was defining sensual pleasures as a cause and the source and the basis of suffering. I'm just going to read the discourse called Maha Dukkha Kanda Sutta. Maha what? Kanda Sutta. I'm going to write this one. I'm going to read this. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, sensual pleasures as the source, sensual pleasures as the basis, as the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Kings quarrel with kings, noble ones quarrel with noble ones, Brahmins with Brahmins, householders with householders, mother quarrels with the child with the mother, father with the child with the father. Is it familiar? I mean, we live in a family, we have seen all these quarrels, We have seen all these what? Quarrels. Brother quarrels with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, friend with a friend. And here is their quarrels, brawls, and disputes. They attack each other with fists, clothes, sticks, or knives, whereby they incur death and deadly suffering. You see? Now with this, this too is a danger of of the case of sensual pleasures. The cause is being simply sensual desire. No, why do people get angry actually? Because the Buddha now, he doesn't have to talk about anger. Anger is a frustration of desires. Anger is what? Frustrated desires. In other words, if we don't get what we want, we get frustrated, and anger is mentioned. So anger is implied in the second noble truth. Because if you are craving for sensual pleasures, and if you don't get what you want, then you start you flip on the other side, and then you have hatred, aversion, and all this kind. So now Buddha was talking about these sensual pleasures, the cause and all these things, how people beat each other. Not that they desire to beat each other. No, is when they have their ideas, maybe they desire for a certain, they have a view and being opposed. Maybe, do you have a problem? I think when I teach in USA, it's a meditation center in winter, people they have the desire to get clean air, They desire to do what? To get fresh air. And then another person, this winter, another person said, no, I want clothes, it's so cold. You see now the battle there. Close the window. No, I need fresh air. Now people become conflicting, you know. It's because our desires are frustrated. So next time when you have conflict with somebody, find out what was your desire. And now when that desire is not met, then you have some kind of conflict. And now in order to solve that conflict, this is how you do. Acknowledge that, okay, I understand your point of view. I really understand. Most people are frustrated not so much because they want you to be right or wrong or whatever. They really want to make sure that you understand them, by the way. And as long as somebody you say, oh, I understand you. I understand, perfectly understand why you are frustrated. I understand why you want the window to be closed. I really understand. You want the window to be closed? Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I understand. Oh, is that what you want? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm unable to meet maybe your desire, but I have the view that maybe I'm coming from this place. So you tell them where you're coming from also. I'm coming from this place of this. So people actually, for me, even when somebody does wrong to you, people are very interesting. They don't need a much. They just need, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In fact, but most of the time we go to justify our intentions. We justify our intention to be good, and then we forget our impact. So there's intentions and there's impact. So in other words, whenever you are living in a relationship, I would like you to recognize two things. One is the intention. What's the intention? And with this intention, what's the impact? So now when you goof, when you go wrong, well, you ask somebody, what was the intention? And how did this impact you? So once you really acknowledge both, then there's no problem usually. But the problem, where the problem comes, we always note, we just say, I'm a good person. I have good intentions, so I can't wrong you. I can't wrong you because I'm a good person. I'm a Buddhist. How can I wrong you? You are my friend. You are my intention is good. But what are we forgetting in the equation? The impact. So the intention might be good, but it might impact others differently. So the best way then is to acknowledge, even when you have good intention, you have to acknowledge the impact of your intention. So what people need is to acknowledge how you impacted them. Oh, you mean my action impacted you this way? But for me, again and again, most people justify their positions, okay, about their intention, all right? Intention. And they cause a lot of suffering. So now when you acknowledge your intention, then you recognize the cause of the problem. I had good intention to do this, but also I understand my intention impacted you this way. So if you make those acknowledgements, normally people, that's what they want. Because we all have different views. Actually, if we all have the same views, I'm telling you, we will have a problem. So that's how we complement each other, you know. But the key is that, do we acknowledge our intentions? Do we acknowledge our impact? So we just need both, and then we go on. Yeah, that's normally what people need. But we cause a lot of conflict because we have different desires and all these things. So now we can see how father, mother, and all this. The sutta goes on. It talks about, again, the sensual pleasures as a cause, and people plunder and commit burglary, ambush highways, seduce others' wives, and when they're caught, kings have many kinds of torture inflicted on them. The kings have them flogged with the whips, beaten with canes, beaten with clubs, on and on. This discourse you should read. I'm going to give it to you. But let's go to external causes. It's already 9. What time does it end? 9:30. I want to leave just about a few minutes. I want to show you the external causes, and then we open it to Q&A. Now, one such external causes is called economic. I wrote it down last time. Called what? Economic policies. So now, discourse called Chakravarti Sutta, Chakravarti Sihanada Sutta. Here, the Buddha is talking about when people heard the king was giving away property to those who took what was not given, and when they thought, suppose we were to do likewise, and then another man took what was not given, and they brought him before the king. The king asked him why he had done this, and then he replied, Your Majesty, I have nothing to live on. The king thought, if I give property to everybody who takes what is not given, this theft will increase more and more. I had better make an end of him, finish him off once for all, and cut his head off. So he commanded his men, bind this man's arms tightly behind him with a strong rope, shave his head closely, and then lead him to the rough sound of the drum through the streets and squares, and out through the southern gate, and there finish by inflicting the capital penalty and cutting off his head, and they did so. So this is a punishment they were giving people, and now the problem is, I'm going to summarize. Thus, from not giving property to the needy, poverty became rife. From the growth of poverty, then taking what's not given increased. From the increase of theft, the use of weapons increased. From the increased use of weapons, the taking of the life increased. And from the increase in the taking of life, people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result of this decrease in lifespan and beauty, the children of those whose lifespan had been 80,000 years lived only 40,000 years. So now, what do we get from this discourse? Lack of distribution of wealth. Because here the king was not giving the property to the needy, all right? So the external cause of suffering is what? Poor distribution of wealth. That's one cause in this discourse, in Digha Nikaya. Another discourse, so now we can say, in the Noble Eightfold Path, the second truth, do we find this? But it's there in the discourse. We found out also to bring suffering. That goes to say that the Buddha had a purpose when he was talking about the second noble truth, was to oppose those views and now bring out liberation. Because people are not liberated. Why people are not liberated? Those who have studied Buddha's teaching. These are fetters, isn't it? This is one of the fetters, the lower fetters. There are three fetters. The first one is believe in self what? Self what? Then one fetter is here. When the second one? Then another one is skeptical doubt. Oh, now skeptical doubt came out of this. Skeptics. They also oppose this, so they start to be skeptical. They start to do what? To be skeptical. Now skeptics, they just suspended their judgment. When you ask this, they say, no, maybe yes or no. You ask them, maybe yes or no. For me, we don't know. I'm going to teach about this later on. So skeptic is also become a fetter. So now to reach liberation, you need to break the fetters, isn't it? That's why you need, Buddha taught this way. But Buddha is also teaching here, this is causing suffering. But it's not about fetters. This is not about what? Breaking the fetters. But it also causes suffering. So now we go to the discourse, another discourse. We have finished this one. We go to another discourse. It's in the Kudadanta. 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 Kutadanta. 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 1, 2, 3. Oh, number 5. Page 133. 133. Okay, we are going to see 133. 133. This is called Kutadanta Sutta, a bloodless sacrifice. So now here we see, here we see Buddha teaching on other kind of suffering, which was again poor economic policies, but he's giving it in a way like this. The chaplain replied, "Your Majesty's country is beset with thieves, is ravaged, villages and towns are being destroyed. The countryside is infested with brigands. If Your Majesty were to tax this region, that would be the wrong thing to do. Suppose Your Majesty were to think, I'll get rid of this plague of robbers by execution and imprisonment, and by confiscation, threats and banishment, the pledge would not be properly ended. Those who have survived would later on harm Your Majesty's realm. However, with this plan, you can completely eliminate the plague. To those in the kingdom who are engaged in cultivating crops and raising cattle, let Your Majesty distribute grain and fodder. To those in trade, give capital. To those in government services, assign proper living wages." So then the cause of suffering in this kingdom was lack of what? Lack of proper minimum, we can say minimum wage. Lack of what? Minimum wage. Another problem was lack of what? For the traders was lack of capital. Then for the farmers was lack of fodder, grain. There was no grain and fodder distribution from the government. So they were advising the king to do this kind of three things. So then we can safely say that external cause of suffering is poor economic policies from this discourse, because the king was not giving farmers grain and crops, and fodder. And now for the trader, was not giving them capital. And then for the government services, was not giving a minimum wage. And guess what? This 2,600 years ago. But do we see these riots in France because people are not given minimum wage? Is it not causing suffering? Yes, when people are not given a minimum wage, you hear from one country the labor laws, they're not given proper thing, and the people riot. They burn buildings. Because in Uganda, doctors, they riot. They say that we're not getting enough money for our salary. So they're suffering. So why didn't the Buddha didn't introduce that in the Second Noble Truth? He would have put that way. Poor economic policies is the cause of suffering. So now I'm just submitting it to you that we have explored the causes of suffering, external and internal, and Buddha's teaching had an aim in the Second Noble Truth. When we talk about the genesis, the cause of suffering, it was aimed at something, that one. To get rid of this and get liberated. This is good. This is all good news. We get to expand our knowledge and explore. That's why I talked about this topic, exploring the causes of suffering. So now we have explored them, and I will end the discourse. There's more exploration in the future, but I think this is enough for today. Thank you very much for listening to the talk.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Now, questions.
Your chance to ask.
If you don't ask, I'll ask you. Because I know. I know. Yes.
No, so Bhante, you can ask them. Oh, yes, there's one here. Smart.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Bhante, for your sharing. Sorry, this question comes across as not really properly formed, but just want to ask, I think I've read that you have you have taught and you have encountered a lot. I mean, you've traveled a lot in the world. So, just wanting to understand, like, what are your thoughts on how or maybe you have any stories, interesting stories on how, like, the different cultural clash and the issues with cultural communication between the different cultures, how it affects this suffering. Yeah, because sometimes I think, I'm not sure if it's a clash of a cultural values and whether the cultural communication between different cultures is and also something that contributes to it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually that's part of the external causes of suffering. External causes of suffering. I just mentioned economic. For economic policies, there's economic, social, cultural, but I looked at the time, there's not enough time. Yes, but for me, I feel that once you get this properly, you'll really enjoy Buddha's teaching. Once you understand the critical response of Buddha's teaching, you are going to start enjoying whatever Buddha is teaching, whether dependent ordination or what. So I spend more time on this because though it will come when I give a talk on clinging, also it will come, but I wanted also to talk about other factors, external causes, socio-political, economical, and all that. These are external causes. So culture also can bring a lot of suffering. Sometime after traveling for a while, I found out also culture. I was getting into problem with culture. I was running into problem with what? Culture. So come 1999, I moved to USA. And now I was working before I became a monk in a meditation center. And from being an African, we know that elders have wisdom. The elders have what? Wisdom. The more you grow, the more wisdom you have. And then from African point of view, we respect elders. We have a great respect for what? For elders. Now, I was working in a front office, and then there was one scientist who was like my mother, but I was 32, she was about 60. And I respected her very well. And then we were managing a retreat because my job was a retreat manager, coordinating retreats and all that. One time I made a comment that, I respect you because you are older than me. You are what? Older than me. I respect you. I'm telling you. She said, what? I'm older? I'm old? You mean I'm old? I'm telling you, it backfired on me. Then in USA, they say he's senior. Senior. You don't tell people that you're old. No. Now, in fact, normally now I want even to say, you are 50 years younger. Then people are happy. But you mentioned old. There are people in America, after staying there since 1999, I looked at them, their culture. Sometimes they want smoothen things. They live in some denial. They don't want to make things look very brutal, right? In other words, they don't want to face the reality so much. Yeah, so death, forget about it. Don't talk about death. No. Yeah. So people just passing away. It's as if they're expiring, like documents. So now what death is so heavy, it's just very depressing, There are a lot of euphemistic terms. We call them euphemism. They use euphemistic terms to water down the feeling of things. So you cannot say you are unemployed. You say you are between jobs. Yes, that's less harsh than say I'm unemployed. Unemployment, somebody is not going to say I'm unemployed. No way. You're American? No. American? I thought you were going to help me. But I've lived there long enough that I also became an American. But there are many terms. You know, airplanes, you hear it all many, many times. In case of unlikely, in the unlikely case of landing, they don't talk about crashing. You know, that airplane coming down, they don't talk about the airplane is going to crash, better put on a mask. They say, in the unlikely event that the oxygen drops. You know, they don't even tell us how long it's going to drop. Doesn't take, so they use a lot of euphemisms so that you can travel safely without worrying about that airplane, that flying coffin to come down. They don't talk about that. Because it's going to, already people are so stressed, they don't want to cause stress. So what I discovered very soon that American people want, their culture is to smoothen things. So then they don't talk about alcohol. They don't talk about alcohol, adult drinks, beverages, adult beverages. Wow. So now the culture brings a lot of suffering because they leave us confused, and they bring us confused, and now also if you say it, it brings suffering. If you say things, they bring suffering. Yeah. You said somebody stole something. No, somebody took what's not given. That's stealing. Not given is what? So now that's culture. Now I went to India. From Uganda fresh, I went to India. In Uganda, we shake hands. We hug. You know, when we are greeting, we shake hand and hug. My friend, I reached India, I had the rude awakening. They told me you never touch an Indian lady. Never, 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 never. And since I stayed in India, I never saw anybody greeting, especially a female, including male, but I never saw anybody shaking hands. I spent 5 years in India. So now, that brings suffering, because if you bring a hand like this is a cultural thing. To shake hand with an Indian lady, I'm telling you, you can be beaten. You'll be beaten. And if you're Singaporean, you may get away with it, but you're an African. You're an African, you are done deal. In India, as a young man, in Uganda, in schools, the teacher could not start teaching until female and male sit next to each other. So in class, the teacher could not start teaching until the class has one girl and one boy sitting together. In the desk, one boy, one girl, because it's mixed school. So the gender was not a problem. For the first time to know that gender was a problem is when I was in India. In the college where I was studying, the girls on one side and girls on the other side. So when you have a problem in accounting, you don't go to the female to ask a problem in academics. Don't. If you have a problem. So I suffered. Because in my school in Uganda, if you have a problem, mathematics problem, you just toss it to a girl who's bright. And then clearly, but good news, I didn't do much of that because I was a little bit bright. I never got to girls to ask questions. But the thing is that when I went to India, I had a problem. I was doing Bachelor of Commerce, but in Uganda, we don't do accounting on A-levels. We don't do it at all, right? There's no accounting as a subject in grade 11 and 12. We call it O-levels, senior 6. Now, senior 5 and 6. So when I got a scholarship from Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Uganda to go to study in India. India government was paying for my studies. So then I enrolled in the Bachelor of Commerce. And now I'm missing 2 years in the syllabus. Now I'm sweating bullets when I'm in the class. They start teaching accounting to people who have already done accounting for 2 years, me 0. So now I start looking out. Whom am I going to ask when I have a problem? Every time they say, no, don't go and ask. There was a Punjabi girl sitting there. Because in Uganda I was used to ask anybody, just about anybody. When I have a problem in class, they refused. The boys, So what I did, I suffered. So what I did is I got money with my scholarship, which was $50. I had to save my money to go to an Indian teacher. He was examining actually in accounting at the university. He took me through the syllabus. Within 8 months like that, I had covered 2 years. So I suffered. So now I suffered because I could not integrate with the culture. So yes, cultures bring suffering. I was teaching hand signs. For me, I was doing hand signs when I was teaching as a monk. I was doing hand gestures. Then my host said, Bhante, don't make that hand sign. Bring problems. This is cultural. For them, different. In fact, be careful about hand signs. It can land you to problems. They can even take you to prison, by the way. Because people, according to their culture, communicate different with the hand signs. It's cultural, but different meaning. What we mean in Uganda, in fact, for me also, sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I travel and places in America and see people making hand signs in Uganda will be terrified, basically. I'm not going to demonstrate them, but you know what I mean. That's why I say culture also brings suffering. Culture brings a lot of suffering that actually in the United States. In the United States, especially where I teach, you find all different gender fluidity. In the United States, people, they say they. There's a he, she. That's a common pronoun in my country. Now, if you're in the USA and you don't disclose your pronoun, then you start suffering. They have to force you to really say, what's your pronoun? Then you hear he, they, them. So now it's fluidity. When I went there in 1999, it wasn't like that. The culture has changed. Now you have to identify yourself as they because of the gender fluidity. There's transgender, there's this and that and that. So you can suffer yourself. How you suffer? If somebody is a he, because they can change it to a she next year when you go. So now you still continue to say her and she, you start suffering now. They say, no, that's not my pronoun. My pronoun is they. It's very clear even in meditation. When I teach meditation, then you say the gender, he was doing this, she was doing this. They say, no, I'm not he. I'm him. They say, I'm they. Can you please use they or them? I'm not he, I'm not he. I'm not she, I'm not. So now this is culture, you know? And then people will start really tell you off, you know? I'm not he, I'm not she. Yes, since you asked about my traveling and how it brings suffering, yes, it brings, definitely, culture brings suffering. So they have to be careful with the culture. Another question. Thank you very much for asking questions. So can we put that one as part of suffering? Political, economic, culture, as an external part of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Last question, anyone?
There are two here. Two here. Yes.
Hello, Bhante. I really enjoy your talk. It's very interesting and intriguing for me. I enjoyed your two conflicting views concept of the Buddha's teaching causes of suffering very much, as it is a concept that I'm always searching an answer for, because I always contemplate three theories in my mind, whether which is true. The first is internal heaven, which is the Christian view of Jesus Christ, which I believe is the eternalist view that you are talking about. The second one is rebirth, which is the Buddhist view. The third one is internal oblivion, which means no afterlife after death, which can also be called nihilism, which I believe is the atheist view, which is annihilation that you were talking about. I would like to ask you that if nirvana isn't considered as annihilation, since the person doesn't exist anymore in any form and out of samsara and not reborn in the 6 realms, is then nirvana considered the middle way?
Okay, now the question is about nibbana. About what? Nibbana. Now you're opening up a new talk. So, no, since your question I'm going to really answer in short, because if you ask this question from the very beginning, I'm going to talk about nibbana. But now this talk will take 1 hour. So now, people during these 62 views, they thought nibbana is part of this. So the Buddha taught that nibbana is not about this, because that view was there, and it's not about. What's this? Is it nibbana? No. So now, again, nibbana was a critical response. Every time we talk about, I like you to write even this note. Every time you go to Buddha's teaching, write that note, a critical response to the 2 views. You'll get it. Nibbana also was a critical response. If you read this sutta, nibbana was also considered as either something, annihilation. The Buddha says non-annihilation is actually the overcoming of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? Nibbana, one is the overcoming of mental defilements. Overcoming of what? Mental defilements. Mental defilements. Specifically, they're called fetters, all right? You break the fetters, then another one, condition, is that you take the unconditioned, because everything is conditioned. This is, and nibbana is the unconditioned, all right? The what is unconditioned. So now, everything is what? Is conditioned. Is the what? Conditioned. Everything all is conditioned, all right? So now, regarding the other things, nibbana is actually this. The mind takes the unconditioned state, which is nibbana, of course. This is unconditioned. Now, the third definition of nibbana is really actually the overcoming of this kind of thing. And let me see, the overcoming of this, the unconditioned, taking the mind, and then arising of supermundane consciousness. We call it sotapana. Sota means what? The Noble Eightfold Path. So now you enter this, all right? The Noble Eightfold Path, that's what we call sota. And then what comes after that, after this Noble Eightfold Path, is the supermundane consciousness, what we call path and fruit. Path and fruit. So these things arising, you attain that state, but it's not annihilation. It's actually the overcoming of mental defilements, which you call fetters. So now, this you need to understand a few things when we talk about nibbana. We need to talk about the 5 aggregates. We need to talk about anicca, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, the selfless nature of things. Then we talk about dependent origination. So all those teachings, nibbana is the culmination of these things. So it's not about utter nothingness. Then the Buddha used some of the similes about fire. When the fire is blown out, does it go to north? Does it go south? Does it No, it's just blown. So now the question you ask my friend, I hope you are going to attend more sessions. I need to talk more about these things so that you can understand it. But at the moment, be just contented a little bit that, okay, Nibbana is the taking of the mind takes the unconditioned as Nibbana, the unconditioned, because everything is conditioned. Then the overcoming of the fetters in stages, there are 10 of them, stage 1 stage, and then arising of supermundane consciousness. So it's the ultimate peace. Is the ultimate what? Peace and happiness. And most of the time, whenever we talk Nibbana, then because it's unconditioned and the words we are trying to use the condition, so it becomes very difficult to talk about. So now the best talk, the way to talk about Nibbana is using some metaphors the Buddha used. But now you can say at least one of the definition of Nibbana is the cessation of craving, cessation of craving for sensual pleasure, cessation of craving for being, cessation of the craving for non-being. That once you have overcome that, you reach Nibbana. How does it look like? Go there, you'll tell me. Because, because there's no way I'm going to tell you that you get satisfied, but just get it to know that way. But the good news, here's the good news. There's what you call moment-to-moment Nibbana. I mean Nibbutto, moment-to-moment. Every moment you meditate and you overcome greed, hatred, and delusion, that small piece you feel even for temporary moment, it can tell you when you let go completely. In other words, you may not know Nibbana from my answer, but you try it when you have a problem and there's attachment to this problem and you let go that, the peace you feel. That peace gives you what you call Tatanga Nibbutto. It's called Tadanga Nibbutto. You find it in Sanyutta Nikaya. Tadanga Nibbutto is momentarily release. That means you feel a moment of three things. Let go of ignorance or greed. Ignorance or delusion. Let go of anger, hatred, and greed. If you meditate sometime and you have a little bit of iota even removed, wow, I've let go this. That feel aha moment. This gives you the idea what happens when you have totally let go. Then you get to know that. But it's not annihilation. It's really a perfect peace, happiness, and ultimate freedom from the causes of suffering. That's what I can say at the moment. Otherwise, these are very technical things. We can talk about them later on, really. But Nibbana also was taught because of that, to get rid of these things. There's one question I forgot, actually. I don't know whether you remember it. I asked from the very beginning. I think you remember something I was asking you? But never mind. Though you have a mind, but never mind. So, any last question? So, what is that?
No, not that one. He's already answered that.
I have answered that question. The last question is there. Last question.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante, for the talk. I'm just referring to this thing where you mentioned the second noble truth. It's to address the two conflicting views during that time, Buddha's time. And one of them was the last one was craving for extermination or non-existence. And you put it as under the annihilism or nihilism, that view. But are you saying that people with that view then they crave for non-existent? It doesn't seem.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Annihilation. This one, I told you there are two views existing, actually. There was even a third one, but I didn't talk so much about because it was rising above this. It's called skepticism. But these two views, what I'm trying to say is that this is identity of self and body, and now people do what we call self-indulgence. So under self-indulgence, they believe in craving for non-being, because they crave. In many ways, people talk about, okay, when people kill themselves, what we call suicide, not so that they don't exist, think that they are going to stop there. That's why people commit suicide. They think that once they are dead, when they have killed themselves, that will be the end of the problem. But that's not the case. So now, what's your question? Because it was clear annihilationism is people craving for non-being, non-existence. They believe, this is a belief that at the moment of death, the body and the self, or soul is going to cease right there as soon as you die. So no more rebirth and all this. So now, what their behavior, this is more of their behavior. This becomes a behavior. It's more of a behavior. What they will do, they will indulge in sensual pleasures so that because they believe that they have one life. So what's the question? That's what
I can see the reason for coming up with the with the reason of craving for sensual pleasures, but I can't see the non-existence, because I'm almost saying that people with those views, they crave for non-existence.
Yeah, non-existence of the body. They say that, because also, you see, they crave so that they don't exist. They know that after death, nothing will exist. So they say, okay, let us enjoy it because we're not going anywhere to exist. They will be craving for non-existing because the soul and the body is the same. The body and the soul, this is called identity. So the soul or the self and the body, they believe they are the same. At the moment of death, they know that they are going not to exist. So they start craving. So craving is both. One is getting, another one is getting rid of. So now, they crave that, okay, I'm going to enjoy these sensual pleasures, and they enjoy after one, and they say, after all, I'm not going to exist. So I better enjoy now. You give them one bottle of juice, and then they say, give me another one because I don't know whether I'm going to live with them after death. So they take one after that. So they crave not to exist. Is that clear? Yes. Yeah, that's what it means, they crave for non-existence. But in many ways, even somebody, if let's say they're suffering a lot, people, they crave, they say, let's say if somebody is going through a lot of pain, people who don't know about Buddhist teaching, they'll either follow one or the other, right? Yeah, most people also here, they enjoy a lot. Doesn't mean if you have this one, you don't enjoy it. But here people enjoy specifically knowing that they not exist. You know when somebody have 1,000 cows, or whatever, and they know that they are maybe they're about to die. And this the belief they have that they're not going to reborn. Like we Buddhists, we believe we are going to reborn. So we know we got another life and upgrade our existence. So we cannot eat all those cows. But these people will prefer to eat all them. After all, I'm not going to survive, After Lord, even my son is never survive after death. So let me enjoy while it's still here. So they know that they crave and more, then they indulge. It's called self-indulgence. So now with that brings a lot of suffering. Because they don't want to exist in one way, they can commit suicide. Another thing, even when they don't commit suicide, those who are suffering a lot on one hand, but these people, they know for sure, if they have accumulated wealth, they make sure that they finish all their wealth before they die. Because they're craving not to exist. They don't want to exist because these are their beliefs. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
By the way, in Uganda, people died. 200 people died. You know how they died? This was 2000. I was still in USA, and that was 2000. They told them that there's 2YK. The world is going to come to an end. So the religious leader there put all his followers in a worship and set fire on them. And for them, they took themselves willing there because they had learned that the world is going to end, and that's the end of the world. And they killed themselves. That's suffering. If somebody thinks that the world is going to end, they are annihilation. So why continue to see the world ending? Let's end it right here. So 200 people die. You can even Google in Uganda, people died. So people have beliefs and they can die because of those beliefs. Especially world is coming to end. And the Buddha identified that one. Okay, finish.
Thank you, Bhante. Can we share some merits, Bhante?
Anagam idika punyatam anumoditva chiram rakantu lokasasana akasata chabumata devanagama idika punyatam anumoditva chiram rakantu desa akasata chabumata devanagama idika punyatam anumoditva chiram rakantu mampara Etawata chakamehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampadisi. Etawata chakamehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe buddha anumodantu sabba sampadisi. Etawata chakamehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampadisi dia imna punya kamena mame bala samagamo. Satam samagamo hotu yava.
Dusa.